Overtime Podcast.
Yay!
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for the Overtime MMA Podcast for the week of whatever week this is.
Absolutely.
You might notice that you can actually see us. We're going back to trying this shit. You might remember our failed attempt at Periscope, where we had 10-year-olds who gave us emojis, and that was about the extent of our success on Periscope. And so Brett is abroad. Brett, you are going to be moving abroad, so this has to become the standard. Do you have anything to say about the 3 hours we spent trying to get sound flower and all those things working?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't like Macs anymore. I got close to liking Macs, but after dealing with the shit with your Mac, again, I don't like Macs. Yeah,
it was unbearably frustrating, and we went through 4 different things, and now we're no better off than we were, and we went with something that is, I don't know, it should be very easy. You'd think that people would want to do this. Like, the applications for this basic technology of being able to record a Skype conversation, for example,
right,
unbearably hard. It was like putting a glass rod up my urethra and just letting somebody kick it. Swift kick in the urethra glass rod. I don't know if we mark this as explicit content, but for the boys and girls at home, just turn it off. I'm happy that you're viewing, but just turn it off.
I mean, I really don't care if they listen. You know, that's up to their parents to keep them away from it if they're really that worried about it. It's not my fucking problem.
It's a good point. And on the topic of good points, let's move on. I don't know. So this is the Overtime MMA Podcast, which is where we break down the fights from the last week, preview the fights from this coming week. Guys, unfortunately, there was no UFC last week. There was Invicta, Pancrase, and Glory were the 3 combat sports that really stuck out to me. Did you guys watch any of them?
I just caught headlines. Yeah,
that's pretty much where I was at. I went back and watched after the fact. The Glory fights were fun. The Invictus card, it's always solid. Pancrase, man, it just looked bush league. Like,
really?
Yeah, I've watched a couple of the more minor league promotions that they've done on Fight Pass, RFA, for example, and those are kind of but this just looked bad. It looked like the quality they had in the 80s and 90s when Boss Rutan was fighting. It was like below that.
Really? Because every time I try to go back and watch Pancrase, I'm always struck by how little I like it. So to know that it looks just as bad is really upsetting.
Well, Pancrase is just MMA now. They don't have like the fancy shoes and the.
Right. I'm just talking purely about the video quality and so on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, production's probably not very high.
What, you mean you couldn't get a bunch of little guys going around the cage with their cell phones? No, slam him again. I missed it. Fuck. I need to put this on Instagram. Oh, on the topic of Instagram, following, bullshit, social media. Hey, if you have a YouTube account, subscribe. We can't have our own custom URL until we have 100 followers. So
get on top of that, guys.
Help us help you, so you don't have to use Overtime MMA in the search. Click it, or you don't have to click if you subscribe. It's just going to be there. Like, I'm pulling it in your face, just like you remember multiple MIGs from The Silence of the Lambs? Clarice Starling's walking away. I bit my wrist just to watch it bleed. And it flings it in her face, and you could see it get stuck in her hair. That's what our show's going to be like.
It's going to be blood in your hair. That's what it's going to be. That's what it is.
Oh, it wasn't blood.
It is now.
No, it wasn't then, though. It was half a baby, if you know what I'm saying. So anyway, this weekend's card, Mark Hunt versus Frank Mir in Australia. What do you think, gents? You got number 9 ranked in the world, Mark Hunt, 11-10-1, versus Frank Mir, who is something. I think he's like 18.
He's 18-10
or something.
Yeah,
I was good. I said 18-10. I am on fire. I declare myself the winner of the opening segment.
There we go.
I keep thinking about Mark Hunt. I remember a conversation we had when he first came back to he came into the UFC after they had bought Pride, and we were talking about how you thought he didn't belong, and he was fighting. I think it was Shit Congo was his first fight, and No, it wasn't. It was his second fight, and I told you never doubt Mark Hunt. Don't ever doubt the Super Samoan. And then he went on that run that he went on for a couple of years where he was just knocking people out left and right, and it was fine and good and wonderful. But his record at that time was like 6-5, or something like that, or 6-6. And it was one of those moments where you're like, how does someone with this record get to be in the UFC? And he went on this run where he, people were talking about him getting a title shot, and he was knocking people out, and it was his comeback story.
Went up against Dos Santos, and
well, he actually did get a title shot though with Fabricio Verdum. I don't think a lot of people really remember that because he was supposed to get a real title shot if he beat JDS, but then he got an interim title shot against Verdum, which was that was just psychotic.
Right. To
go and fight at Elevation on a couple weeks' notice. And he had to cut like 20 pounds to get to the 365 weight limit. Are you fucking kidding me, bro?
Right.
Like, is there a KFC franchise in your stomach? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, but he's back to being 11-10. He won this great run, and it's like now he's back to 11-10, and it's like, what the fuck, Mark Hunt? Come on, get it together. I believe in you. I'll always believe in you.
I will always root for Mark Hunt. I think regardless of who he fights, I don't necessarily feel like he's going to be anything really. I guess I shouldn't say he's going to be anything better than a above 500 fighter. But I mean, in the UFC these days, especially with his age. It just I don't know. It kind of seems like things are stacked against him.
Oh yeah. Also taking a fight against a guy who is a very decorated grappler.
Right.
When if you look at his losses, he had a TKO loss to Miocic, to Verdum, to Dos Santos, but then his losses before that: armbar, TKO, Americana, Kimura. And his first fight ever was a loss by armbar.
But at the same time, I mean, when is the last time Mir's really done anything on the ground? Was it
when he broke
freaking Nog's arm?
Which was awesome.
But it just seems like he likes to linger on the feet. You know what I mean?
Frank Mir, you mean?
Frank Mir, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Frank Mir
would play into Mark Hunt's game.
Yeah, I think that him knocking out Todd Duffy was pretty rad, right? We can all agree that was a really cool knockout. But then if you go back, his last TKO was that very questionable TKO with Josh Barnett, where Josh gets hit, goes down, and starts moving forward. And they're like, nope, it's off. And so if you go before that, his last TKO, or excuse me, I had that reversed. That's when.
Yeah, I was like, what are you talking about?
Sorry, it was when Mir got TKO'd. But my point standing that. Anyway, so his last two wins were via knockout. It was the Todd Duffy and the Bigfoot Silva. Bigfoot Silva has proven himself to be a very questionable chin.
Right.
Andrei Arlovsky, so on and so forth. So if you go to his last KO win was Mirko Krokop. So, I mean, he clearly has some skills when it comes to high-level kickboxers. So,
well, I mean, the way that I look at Mir is like he always had like a functional striking game, but he was never that impressive. He wasn't like going out there and just like really, really showing off high-level skills, but it was functional. And then he had the grappling game to fall back on because for whatever reason, heavyweights think that you can go to the ground and they don't expect it. And that's where Mir has always excelled. Even against, Minotauro Nogueira, he excelled because Minotaur's used to being the guy who's the best. No one expects anyone other than him to be good at it. And Mir's like, no, I'm actually serious. I'm really fucking good at this. But I think this fight definitely is going to be interesting because it's an old school styles make fight bullshit kind of fight where you have the submission guy versus the guy who all he does is, kickbox. He doesn't go to the ground. He doesn't fuck around about that. So it's going to be, can Mir get it to the ground or is he going to get knocked out trying? And one thing that I really like that I don't think is getting talked up so far about it is the finishing rate is that Hunt has a 73% KO rate, but Mir's finishing rate overall is higher. It's 78%. And so it's going to be I think it'll be a great fight. I can't imagine it's going to go the distance if for no other reason than Mark Hunt probably won't make it that long.
Well, I said famously before Mark Hunt fought Bigfoot Silva, oh, yeah, that fight ain't going 5 rounds. and I look like a complete asshole, which was, candidate for fight of the century according to most people. I would, it was good.
Yeah.
Fight. But I think there are more ways for Mir to win than there were for Bigfoot Silva to win. Do you agree or disagree, Brian?
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has just more things in his arsenal, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bigfoot Silva, and he's a guy who has a lot of clout and a lot of mystique, but it's kind of for naught, because every time Bigfoot Silva loses, you're like, oh, that's right, he's not that good.
Right.
But he has, he beat Fedor. He has a pretty, giant head. He just looks like he's imposing, but then when he loses, you're like,
he just has cinder blocks for fists. You know what I mean? So it's like, if he catches you with one, it's going to do some damage. So if you have a questionable chin, then you're going to get caught.
Yeah. Brett, when it comes to your prediction, who do you got and why?
I'm kind of torn because I generally will pick Mark Hunt out of some really ill-conceived notion of loyalty that I don't understand, but I feel anyway. Especially since he started talking about going vegan, so he gets extra points for that.
Well, is it real though? Because he said that he was going vegan when he posted that picture, but he has stayed so heavy. When I went vegan over 10 years ago, I lost 30 pounds in like a month and a half. It was insane. And I was not a fat guy. I was actually very slim. My cheeks looked gaunt and everything when it first started because it was a huge transition. I don't see any transition from Mr. Hunt.
I don't know. I gained weight when I went vegan, so I think it's just a matter of different people, different experiences.
How did you do that?
I gained like 20 pounds in a month. It was insane.
That's bizarre. Yeah, he posted about it in 2015. August 2015 that he was going.
But he also looked really trim not that long after he posted about it. So he might have lost weight and then started to gain it back.
But here's the thing. I posted an article about it talking about him losing weight, his new summer bod, all that stuff. But then it feels like I might have been made to look like an idiot because everybody's like, oh, no, bro, he was being sarcastic or something. I don't know. But if he is vegan, then I have to root for him by law.
So it's a vegan law, huh?
Yeah.
The other side about
the vegan police from Scott Pilgrim will come after me if I don't. So my hands are tied on this one, guys. I think that Mir could win, but I have to go with Mark Hunt then.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm torn because I really like Mir. I usually go with Mir. I think he's so underrated a lot of the time, and it's sort of overlooked by people. It's like he's a serious threat no matter where you're going to fight him. So it's one of those like I'm going to go with Hunt out of that misplaced loyalty, but I don't have like a strong feeling about either of them.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is great about putting number 9 against number 10, the consequences are relatively low. Worst case scenario, you just invert it,
right.
And so then 10 becomes 9, and so on and so forth. And it's a fight that it sounds kind of tangential, so bear with me. What I love about watching Glory Kickboxing is every time I watch it, I'm pretty ignorant. So I go into it and I can just be, a fight fan.
You can be a casual fan.
Exactly. I don't have that outcome. Every time I go into a fight, it's like in my mind, even if I'm not trying to, I have a hypothesis, and it's all the experiment of if I'm right or not. So when it comes to a fight like this,
it's essentially doing the exact same thing.
Yeah,
go into it, and they're almost the exact same outcome when they go into it. It's not like it's going to be some guy that's a high rank possibly losing to somebody that's a lot lower than him. So,
yeah, which let's get into the co-main event because that's the perfect circumstance. You have Neil Magny, number 9, going against Hector Lombard off of a suspension at number 13, who, I'm sorry, you don't deserve to be ranked if you're coming off a suspension. It's the same bullshit that they did with Dennis Seaver. I have a fundamental disagreement with it as a concept. Am I making too much out of it, Brian?
No, absolutely not. I feel like it's almost seems like it's just a slap on the wrist, and other people can look at it and use that as something to kind of justify, hey, I'm going to do these steroids also, and if I get caught, whatever. I'll still get to fight for these, these big fights where I'll potentially move up in rank.
Brett, what do you think? Because I know that somewhat jokingly, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, you used to be of the Joe Rogan persuasion of like, hey, just let him do whatever, and the best chemist wins.
I'm still like that. I still think, professional fighters can do whatever the fuck they want. I don't care, as long as they're consistent. If you're going to tell me that it's wrong and they should be banned and they should be ostracized for doing it, then fucking ostracize them and ban them and don't let them fight. Otherwise, shut your mouth. Just fucking let them do all the steroids, all the heroin, whatever they want to do. I don't give a fuck. Just let them fight.
It has to be, yeah, it has to be a 100%. This is going to be the consequence. If there is some gray area involved, other people are going to take advantage. And that's with any kind of rule whatsoever. I mean, some stuff, even, I don't want to get into too much detail about, my workplace, but I mean, there's some situations within a small company that I work at where people have gotten away with in the past of doing something where clearly the rules stated that you can't do that. But since nothing ever happened to those people that broke the rules, everybody else is like, fuck it. I mean, you can't technically, I mean, from my standpoint, if I were to do something along the same lines of what they did and get punished for it, I'm gonna be like, fuck you, I'm gonna sue you. Yeah. You know what I mean? What, are you gonna fire me because of this? Well, they didn't get fired. So, you know what? There you go.
It's like a grandfathered in, kind of mums the word, unspoken rule of the land, much like, let's face it, Pride FC was, and a bunch of other promotions where it's like, you can do all the fucking steroids, just don't, you don't narc on us, we won't narc on you, and it's all happy, hunky-dory.
Exactly.
When it comes to the, Hector Lombard specifically, he's a guy who it was always expected, and he had some bullshit story. He's accusing some woman of giving him something to make him feel better because he had a flu. He did everything wrong when it comes to, everybody was saying, look at how Chael Sonnen, for example, was like, yep, they caught me. Not on 1, not on 2, not on 3, but 1,000 PEDs. Okay.
Right.
And I am wholly the fact that he's not on Fox still is kind of silly to me. Kenny Florian can plagiarize. Chael Sonnen can't be there. And so that was a situation where I think he's a guy who exemplifies what you do.
Don't even go there. We got Joe Rogan. What about Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan is upfront about that. He does fucking TRT and takes his steroids just fine. Joe Rogan's all about that shit. He's still the voice of the UFC.
Well, yeah, he even talked about how, people have kept bringing up that fight that was proposed with him and Wesley Snipes, and he goes, man, I would blow up that motherfucking drug test, both in recreational drugs and TRT and stuff. Right. The fact is that, he makes a very good point where he says you're going to reach a point where the average citizen is going to be able to do more than the clean fighter, and whether it be from, growth hormones, whether it be from, nanotechnology, what have you, we're developing at too fast a rate to have this idea that you have to be the natural human. But then here's a guy, like I'm saying, with Hector Lombard, who did everything wrong. He didn't fess up. He was aggressive when people would say that he was on steroids beforehand. He was not a redeemable character. And now we're in a situation he gets to fight in his home country, or, his second home.
Adopted country.
Yeah, he lived in Cuba, then went abroad. I just don't like it. It just bothers me. Am I being a sandy vagina?
I think there's a lot more to be said about this issue in the broadcast than here, but I think it is very, very questionable that he's fighting, on March 19th this year. He got suspended on March 23rd last year because it was retroactive back to January. So literally, he's fighting 1 year after his ban, like 1 year. Like there's no penalty there. There's none. Because he probably would have fought maybe once in between that. Maybe. Right. There's no penalty here.
That's one of the things Brendan Schaub talked about when he was talking about the risk of doing steroids, especially when you're heavyweight and you're a bigger name. You're not fighting as frequently as these other guys. You're not trying to hustle. You can kind of have a layover when it comes to your finances. And so, him being out of here, you're exactly right. That's nothing more than an ACL tear or any of a number of injuries we see guys with all the time. And I'm gonna root for Magny, but do you guys think that he's undersized? I mean, Jesus Christ, look at the two guys. We've said that Magny was kind of lanky and small for the division when he was fighting normal dudes, and now he's fighting a fucking puffed up
fucking guy that's probably still on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean,
in some way or another,
So I'm going with Magny. Absolutely, I'm going with the underdog. I mean, I don't want to say he's the underdog, but when it comes to size advantage and whatnot, it's definitely there.
Well, I think it's interesting though, because if this was the Lombard that came out of Bellator, that was rushing across the ring, fucking slinging bricks in his gloves and is knocking people out like "fuck you" and get out of my way, I would say Magny has a problem. But that hasn't been Lombard's MO since he's been in the UFC. He's been plotting and slow, like bursts of aggression, but overall, kind of, I could really see Magny utilizing the 9-inch reach advantage he has, on top of the height advantage he has, and keeping him away and doing just fine. I think he has a really good shot of winning, and he has a good chin. It's not like it's going to be one shot and he's fucking out of it, So
yeah, that's one thing with Lombard is he came in with Hector Lightning Lombard came in with such amount of hype and mystique, and he was this guy from Bellator, and he kind of exemplifies when guys come over to the UFC from Bellator, historically they just haven't done well. You look at guys who came over from Strikeforce and they've done fantastically, but you look at these guys from Bellator like Eddie Alvarez, while he's done well, he has not looked exciting.
Nothing about it screams, main event.
Yeah, so he has the 2 knockout, since entering the UFC, he has 2 knockouts. Husamal Parharas, who's classically a grappler, and Nate Marquardt, who's had a suspect chin, and he was fighting at welterweight, which we all know that Nate Marquardt at welterweight was a bad idea. Yeah, I mean, it didn't make sense. Then he beat Jake Shields. Then he had the no contest when he beat Josh Berkman. So he hasn't been the crazy guy who was, in Bellator, TKO, KO. I mean, then you go to the CFC before that. I mean, the guy was a fucking killer, and then he gets to the UFC, and it's kind of exposed because once you have that higher caliber of striker against you, once you have a tactician, once you have somebody who can review tape on you, it's a very different game. If I've never seen you fight because you're fighting at CFC 7, which, by the way, doesn't have a Wikipedia page, how am I going to know what you do? How am I going to know your stance? How am I going to know these things besides word of mouth or maybe a cell phone video? And so now I have HD video of you since April 17th of 2009 when you debuted in Bellator, bro. I can go back and watch. I think that just to your point, I think that Neil Magny is going to be in a good position. I think he is going to be an exciting fight. And I think that he has a very, very good potential of winning. It's just that physicality is the only thing where I'm like, ooh, that's awkward.
Right.
Yeah. And also, just as a side point, because we talked about Magny being an underdog, he's actually the favorite according to Fighting. The bookmakers have him as as low as a 130 favorite. So that's pretty good. I think that speaks to people recognizing Magny has the tools and the natural gifts to pull it off. So I'm with Magny on this one. In addition to disliking Lombard out of hand, I think Magny takes it.
Yeah. You guys calling for a finish? You guys calling for just a straight decision? How are you seeing this going down?
I'm going with unanimous. I'm going 3 rounds, unanimous.
What about you, Brett?
I think it'll probably end up going the distance. Because it's kind of like Lombard isn't really that durable and he's kind of slow, so it'll just kind of probably drag out and Magny will take the win, I think, hopefully.
Yeah, looking at Magny's career, I mean, he has a lot of decisions, split decisions. I think this could definitely be one where it's a split decision because I think that the
initial burst from Lombard could win him the round.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it's going to be Magny for rounds 2 and 3, Lombard for round 1. A question to
who really controls the second round, where Magny would clearly win the third round with the slow plotting Lombard.
Exactly, and Magny's proven to have a great gas tank. He's proven to be very durable. I mean, he's a guy who keeps on keeping on. And Lombard has been a guy who's proven that he tires out remarkably quick. Right. Look at his fight against Tim Boesch, who we have all said is like the worst fighter ever. And that fight was the worst fight ever, but was still on par with every other Tim Boesch fight. Am I saying anything out of turn, gentlemen? I think I'm right.
Pretty straight on.
All right, so we all have Magny, and I think we're all saying unanimous decision. When it went to the main event, I don't know if we actually I
don't know if we really I mean, we all chose who we wanted to win. I don't think we actually went over how we thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a questionable one, right?
I wouldn't put money on it, so let's not put money on it.
Right? It's one of those things where it's like, go for broke. I'm doing Hunt, absolutely. Yeah. But how or if I'm absolutely positive that it's gonna be Hunt is another question.
Exactly. So let's move on to Jake Matthews versus Johnny Case. This is an interesting matchup. It's 2 young bucks, but it also fits the theme for the entire rest of the card, which is rankings don't mean shit, right? You have the guys in the first 2, like the main and the co-main, barely top 10, barely top 15. And then no other fighter on the card is ranked. Even Ross Pearson, who's the main event on the prelims, is unranked. He's a big name, but he's unranked. So this is kind of like a weird, vacation in Australia where nothing matters. It's just like, what happens in Australia stays in Australia.
I don't know. This goes back to this thing about, like, they have a lot of cards going on, right? And that's okay, though. Like, they have a lot of fighters. They got to have these kind of cards where they put people out there, let them fight, but they don't have to matter every fight. It doesn't have to be a fucking, this is for the top 10. I want to break and get that title.
I haven't really even looked at the information much. Sorry, guys. On when the fight actually is. When is it airing?
March 19th, which is on, I think it's Saturday.
Is it Saturday? So it's in Australia though. Is it going to be at 7 at night here? So early,
early during the day
there.
Which people have said like, it's just their usual of watching it at like Sunday morning. That's their typical time for watching MMA.
Okay, because sometimes where they've done UFC events in the past, where it's in like Japan or this or that, and it's like Saturday morning, and it's like, well, I guess that makes sense where they can have these kind of fighters that don't really get a lot of recognition. They don't have that, top 10, top 15 caliber, but I mean, they got to get their fights in,
Yeah. So let's just do a little bit of math here. You got women's bantam, women's straw, flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, light heavy, heavy. That's 10 divisions. You have top 15 in each of those divisions. You're talking about 150 ranked fighters in the UFC.
150 ranked fighters, okay. Give or take how many, okay, so let's say on a main card, between a main card and a prelim, that is 10 fights?
Yeah, give or take.
Give or take, yeah.
Give or take 10
Depending
fights.
on if it's
10 fights,
so
that's 15 fights to cover at least every single person within the, the top 15.
Yeah, and so we'll say, like, you look at how many times
15, I should say, pay-per-views.
Well, and then you look at how many times these fighters want to fight a year. Barring injury and other circumstance, the average fighter, let's say 2 to 3 times a year. So the fact that this card is so barren is kind of scary. At the very least, if you knew it was going to be this barren, if you knew you were going to be this dry, why wouldn't you pair up guys with people out of the top 10 so you have at least that intrigue of, this guy's breaking in, this guy's proving he deserves to be here, instead of, hey, this guy's kind of low, and like I said, with the main event, they're interchangeable. With Hector Lombard and Neil Magny, really, Magny's a couple fights removed from his loss to Damian Maia, but still, that's pretty fresh in everybody's mind because that's one of Maia's most dominant wins as of late. You see what I'm saying? It's like
I respect that, but also this card strikes me very much as a regional card. Most of the fighters are from Australia or in the South Pacific. There's a couple of Canadian fighters I noticed. But overall, they're Australian fighters,
You can't be mad at that, It's just showing the love for and UFC has kind of been synonymous with doing that as far as, like, anytime they go to, England or, Michael Bisping fights in England and it's like majority of the card has some sort of person within that region.
Well, my huge thing with Australia as well is just think of the travel costs, man. Like, I want a vacation there for my honeymoon, and it's thousands of dollars. So you take that fighter, you take 2 of his cornermen, you put him up in a hotel. Fuck no, I don't want to pay that if I'm the UFC for what's truly kind of an untested market. Whereas I could just take a bunch of talent who's already there.
Exactly.
And let's be frank. If you're James Tahuna, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, he's coming on a 3-fight losing streak and he hasn't fought in 2 years. He's going to be desperate for whatever you pay him. So if you give him 8-8, he's going to take it and like it because he's grateful to have a fucking job at this point. Right. So I could do that and save myself a shit ton of money. What's the UFC going to do? The UFC typically errs on the side of saving their money.
Well,
without sounding too conspiratorial.
Well, no, saving their money, and also, if you stack a card with a bunch of people from everywhere the fuck else in the world, why would all the people in Australia come to see it? Half of the reason why people show up is names they recognize that are from areas that they're from. I think in the U.S. we sort of take for granted the fact that we can watch a John Jones who's from Albuquerque or New York, whatever. We can watch a GSP who's from Canada. We can watch all these different people from all these states all across. That's so highly populated.
Right, it's so highly dense. Yeah. Whereas you look at something like Australia, and it's just, it's essentially them and the Kiwis.
Yeah, well, and then the Philippines and the South Pacific, but to them, I'm sure that they see it the same way we do. Like, there's fighters from all over, Australia or what the fuck ever, but the market itself is pretty small. So they have to take what they can and put it there. So I understand it. I don't blame them for it. And yeah, they've got these guys on their roster. They got to fight. They got to have them fight sometime. Might as well do it when they're close to home.
The way I look at it is, I mean, the Aussies, they'll look at it and be like, hey, yeah, UFC's throwing a UFC pay-per-view event for us, or, you know, a UFC event for us, and they're kind of looking out for the small guys.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, there's something to be said about it. I mean, they tried really hard with the Ultimate Fighter shows that have featured Australian fighters, and the fact is that the talent just hasn't really blown up. But it's not to say that it can't. I mean, there are still people who have a great following, even despite their obvious failures. Like, we're going to talk about James Tahuna. We're going to talk about Bec Rawlings. These people have not flourished in the UFC, but, you know, you take the stars where you can make the stars.
Right.
And when you don't have a lot of competition, you have nationalistic pride. I mean, think about it. Aside from Conor McGregor, who just come off of a loss, obviously, you have Gunnar Nelson, who's lost twice. You have Paddy Houlihan, who just lost. You have Aisling Daly, who lost, I think it was one fight ago. You have a bunch of Irish fighters and European fighters who lose, but still have a huge following, and they don't skip a fucking beat. Whereas if you're in the UFC and you're from America, hey, guess what, brah? You better win every fight. And if you do win, you better win well. And that's another huge thing. Not even like, look at Gegard Mousasi. You know, you have him winning dominantly in London, doing a great job, and he's being criticized because he didn't win well enough. That's a bizarre thing, but, you know, you see a lot of the European fans not getting into that kind of guffaw, if you will.
Right.
Brett, do you have any points? I think I might have cut you off.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was going to say, speaking of hype, Jake Matthews, who is a guy from Australia, in his last fight, last couple fights, he was getting a super hard push, even though he lost. It was one of those fights where he comes in and you've got the commentators just going like, oh, he's the greatest thing ever. Look at how aggressive he is. Oh, shit, he got submitted. You know, it was one of those kind of fights. But he's a great example of a person that they clearly want to push. He's very marketable. He has a huge following there. But I wonder about him being on the hype train and what happens if he loses there again. What does that do, again, to their marketability even in Australia? How can they build these stars that are, you know, they kind of lose when they try to put their weight behind him? Same thing with Tahuna. They tried to give him a push, and then he got fucking crushed a couple times.
Yeah, and, you know, it's another thing where you're in a damned position because you want to set up a guy to look good, but you don't want to look like you're spoon feeding him, because then you get in a situation where it's Conor McGregor getting a title shot off of Dennis Seaver. People are like, what the fuck?
Or Sage Northcutt / Paige Van Zandt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You don't want to put him in a situation where it looks like you're spoon feeding, because that shows favoritism and blah, blah. But then at the same point, why would you invest the time and money in people if you're not going to get a return?
Yeah, if you're going to throw them into the Sharks and just have them get fucking destroyed.
Another fight that's on the card that I think has a lot of potential to be a really good fight is actually Alan Juban versus Brendan the Badger O'Reilly. I think that's probably going to be a lot of fun to watch. Brendan O'Reilly is from Australia. I don't even know where the fuck Alan Juban is from. Oh, he's from the U.S. But they both have like...
He might be from Australia, Brett, but his facial hair is straight out of Marvel Comics.
Hell yeah.
Hi, Wolverine.
Well, he couldn't go with the Wolverine. I'm sure that's trademarked. He had to go with the Badger.
Brett might join the Amish in a little bit, so he might have the same facial hair. So
I'm gonna get a hat and I'm gonna get a cart and buggy, and I'm gonna fucking drink and ride drunk. I'm gonna ride drunk all day.
Right. You're gonna build some amazing like barns and like electric. What is it?
No. Electricity is of the devil. We don't do that.
No. It's not it's the non-electric fireplace or whatever they build. I forget.
Fireplace?
The stove? The kettle?
It's like in the back of you see all the time.
Give you a Dutch oven?
Non-electrical heating fireplace that they build or something.
One of those black kettle things? It's like
no, I don't think so. No, it's like some sort of crazy Amish black magic. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet.
Speaking of Amish black magic, Brett, Brian told me you weren't too keen on the witch either.
No.
Yeah,
but
bro.
I think
you and me both.
What?
You and me both.
What?
I was not a huge fan.
Oh, good. Yeah, because I think we talked about it. It was like, I thought it was so great all the way up until the end, and then it's just like, what?
Yeah, and that little kid is a fucking great actor. I was very impressed. And Yeah, just throw it away.
Yeah, fuck it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes,
Let's go back to James Tahuna versus it's Mike Boss, right? Steve Boss, Steve Jobs.
He's the boss. However you say his name, he's the boss.
Steve, that's right. And Steve is 10-1, and that one comes from it was supposed to be Rampage, and then a really weird time I recall where Rampage was coming away from Bellator but going back to Bellator, and
was that when Rampage was like hitting people with his cars?
A little bit out of brain chemistry leading up to those life decisions. But Boss is a dude who's pretty old. It was Thiago Santos. That's right. He got head kick knocked out. That was like amazing. How could I forget that? I know because I don't know who Thiago Santos is because I don't, that's one of these things.
Thiago Santos is Rampage Jackson. It's okay.
Yeah, why not? They're all interchangeable at that level. But point being, you have a guy who's an old hockey player who, fuck, man. That's not a good.
That can't be good for James Tahuna, who doesn't like to get punched in the face.
Oh, clearly doesn't like to get punched in the face. Dude would rather get kicked in the arm 100 times till it breaks than get hit in the face. It is very apparent. Like, he cringes just like Brock Lesnar, like winces before he gets hit. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
he chose this to be his profession when he doesn't like getting hit in the face. There are some guys who like getting hit in the face a little too much. You're wondering if they're a masochist. And then this guy's like the antithesis of that. And you're like, so you like to hit but not get hit. Right.
Yeah.
You should have been a police officer then. Oh, feel the burn.
What?
I'm not going any farther than that. This isn't a political podcast. But who do you got and why, guys? This fight that has no meaning anywhere, and neither of these guys will ever fight for a UFC title.
I'm going with the boss.
I'm
going to go with Boss too, just because I like hockey. But otherwise, I could not give two shits less about this fight.
Yeah, no call. Don't even care. I hope that someone falls down.
And then we could all yell at the screen.
Yeah.
You fell down.
Fantastic. I think that if James Tahuna comes out wearing hockey pads, it's a fair fight.
Yeah.
But he has to wear a jersey too, so Boss can grab him from the back, rip it up and over. That's fair. Right. Boss doesn't wear any pads. Tahuna wears pads, but he has to wear a jersey, so that's how you level it out with the handicap. Moving on, Bec Rawlings versus some woman whose last name is Ham. I'm gonna root for Ham because I don't know anything about her. She could have a 1-11 record. I would still root for Ham because I think that Bec Rawlings is fucking annoying.
What's funny is I follow her on Instagram and I like her annoyance. It's kind of intriguing me a little bit.
But you know that she's being annoying, right?
Right.
Like, okay.
I do.
So just so long as you can admit that, because some
Absolutely.
people are like, "Oh, she's so hot." I'm like, "No."
No,
Or she's
she's
like,
not.
"Oh, she's so thought provoking." No. Like she's just an annoying
She's
person.
really not that attractive. I think a lot of people follow her because she tends to wear no clothing or little to no clothing a lot. But God, I mean, her like weird hair she's got going on all the time, and
her hair is literally she stole it from a bird of paradise. Have you seen that? Look up the flower bird of paradise.
It's like her hair like half the time almost looks like Donald Trump hair. Just saying.
Whoa.
I wouldn't say that far off, my friend. I probably hate it just about as much. So we're all rooting for Ham. Are you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. In fact,
I'm not even going to look up her fight stats to see if it should be by submission, decision, knockout. I'm just going to put a check.
That's most likely going to be by decision.
Yeah.
But I'm
glad one of us did our homework.
If Bec Rawlings cries at any time, I will send Ham money for that. I will send her money.
Yes. That's one thing that one of us needs to do, some research and find out her PayPal account and just a nice $50 the next day if she makes her cry.
She makes Bec Rawlings cry.
Get those tears.
Moving on, we talked about it briefly earlier. Ross Pearson versus Chad Laprise. That's not a nice fight. That's a hard fight for Ross Pearson.
Yeah, that's a
guy who's desperately trying to reestablish himself and be in the top 15.
Right.
Yeah, and Chad Laprise, I mean, so he's 11-1, and he has a 55% knockout percentage, and he beat Aubin Mercier, which means that he's not going to have a problem fighting off any takedowns. Not that Pearson goes for those. His only loss is to Francisco Trinaldo, who also beat Ross Pearson. So it's one of those fights where A guy that beat both of them, now they're going to fight. And I don't know. I like Ross Pearson, and I would like him to win in a way, but I kind of don't see it happening. His whole, like, get in close kickboxing style is great if the person's going to let him do it. If they're not going to let him do it, he leaves his chin out, just like presented face first all the fucking time.
So it's almost kind of like a Pettis situation. If somebody just sits there and stands there and lets him set up his amazing like kickboxing and like fancy style, then he'll do really well. But if it's somebody like Eddie Alvarez who rushes him, or Clay Guida that rushes him, or anybody that really puts him out of his element, then it's hard for him to do anything.
Or anybody who has better lateral movement. It's amazing to me that he trains with Dominic Cruz, but he has a very rough time where he ends up in this chase situation when any guy wants to, pivot and move around him. I can only imagine what their sparring sessions would be like, because I think that Dominic was
kind of just like funnel vision, where he's just literally just kind of focusing on one thing.
It feels like it, and he kind of had for a while there. He was going for like the baby Vanderlei, where he just wing his arms, or like a tiny, equally tattooed Chris Lieben.
Okay. Yeah.
So I like seeing him develop. I have noticed development, but he does definitely, like Brett said, have a really hard time when it comes to any kind of pressure forward or him chasing someone. He very much relies on being in that kind of the right place, the right time, the right setup. I don't think he deals well with the distance.
So he's like a pocket. He's a guy that excels in the pocket.
Yeah, I think that like him versus Diego Sanchez would be wonderful if they ever did it again, because that's the one where Diego got that crazy, split decision win over him, where you're like, wait, hold on, huh? And the reason being why Ross Pearson was able to look good, why that was an exciting fight, was because Diego Sanchez was like, no, hit me again, yes, yeah. He's a guy who I think likes getting hit a little bit too much.
Right.
I think that he will never need Viagra so long as he has a UFC contract.
Yeah, well, that's one of the fights where when it comes to Diego Sanchez, I was like, I think the reason why he wins decisions is because judges see his face as his offense. It's not so much that people are hitting him; he's hitting their fist with his face.
The headbutt to the fist, a la Nick Diaz versus BJ Penn.
Yep, every time.
All right, so those were the only fights that we have that mattered on the card. One fight that I did want to talk about when it came to the Invicta card over the weekend was the gal who I made fun of. I believe her name was Jennifer Maya. She had a great fight, but she won a title, and I made a meme where it was her, they were putting the belt on her, and she's yelling, "God damn it, this belt doesn't match any of my shoes." That was just in fun. I just want to say, I really enjoyed the fight. I can proudly say I've seen literally every Invicta card.
Did anybody kind of backlash you on that one?
No, I wanted in an abundance of caution to kind of say that, because I do find myself in a situation where I like to think of myself as like a social justice activist or whatever. Yeah. And I think that I knew it was sexist as I was posting it.
I was going to say the feminist revolt. Yeah. They're going to be.
But luckily they never look at the hashtags that would find my picture anyway. So I'm like, whatever. That's one of the great things about being us, is that we're so minor league that I could just say shit. Right. Unless you're Nick Diaz or Inside Edition, you're not going to find it.
I was going to say we're not minor enough for Nick Diaz, though. Got to tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he keeps it close to the streets. That makes sense.
Yeah, apparently.
Well, right on, guys. I think this is where we end it for the Overtime MMA podcast for the week. Stay tuned on the same channel, on the same time, in 5 minutes. We're going to do the Overtime MMA broadcast. So I am Jake. This is Brian. Brett, say your name so your picture pops up.
I'm Brett.
I just said say your name. Is it that? You have one job.
I'm Brett.